So hello, and thank you for joining this session of the McGill Executive Institute's Level Up webinar series. My name is Eric Sain, Director of the Institute, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. This is our first session of the spring season 2021, and great to see that we have people from around Canada, the United States. I saw somebody from Denver coming in from France, so bonjour and hello. This session is going to last about 1 hour and include time at the end to answer your questions. Also, although you'll be on mute, we want this to be a very interactive session. So don't hesitate to put your chat questions and comments in the chat, which is at the button at the bottom of your screen. Also, for better viewing, we recommend that you keep your video off. So we're very proud to welcome your course leader for today, Jane Reichman Van Toch. Jane is a faculty member of the McGill Executive Institute and a specialist in leadership development, coaching, and emotional intelligence. She's going to be joined by our Director of Public Programs, Pamela Sorrenti, who is going to be your moderator for today. So with that, again, thank you all for joining. And let's get started. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thanks again, Eric and Pam, for inviting me to participate in this Level Up session. So today we're going to be talking about leaders as coaches. But before we dive into that topic, we'd like to hear from you. And so let's do a little check-in. How are you coming in today? Let's check into this virtual room of ours. Just share a few words to describe how you're feeling. And you can use the pictures as inspiration. And could you please put your answers in chat? So how are people doing, Pam?
So we're just gonna wait a couple of seconds. We got a sunny but cold here in Montreal. Feeling great today, motivated, rainbow, love that. Hopeful rainbow, Merry Christmas. Yes, I'm feeling that one too today. Doing good. The weekend's coming. Everyone's doing pretty good. A couple of cloudies. That's pretty normal, I think, also in our contexts.
Absolutely.
To have good days and bad days. But I'm loving the optimism and the sunshine, really, that's coming out today.
Fantastic. I love it. So let's dive in. Today, we're going to be looking at leaders as coaches. And we're going to look at some different types of coaches. What is coaching and what are some essential and effective coaching skills? And the question is why? Why are we talking about leaders as coaches now? And what is the driving force behind that? And what is the organizational value for coaching? And we're going to be looking at a coaching model, the GROW coaching model. And again, as we go through the session together, please don't hesitate to put your questions and your comments in chat. We'd love to hear from you. So coaching has really exploded. The profession of coaching has really exploded, particularly in the last decade. And there are many different types of coaching, and they're quite fluid. Some of them overlap with each other. But I just thought I would share a few of the ones that we hear the most about so that there's clarity around them. So executive coaching is what it says. You coach executives and, on leadership issues or in terms of better understanding how to manage change, how to deal with people. And leadership coaching is exactly that. We coach people on how to build their leadership skills. So we look at what their strengths and challenges are and what some obstacles might be to their leadership. Business coaching is really helping people with their business. So if somebody's in sales, it's how do you help them become more effective in their selling process. Career coaching is pretty self-evident. How do you maybe forge a new path in your career, or you just want to improve the career that you have. Life coaching really goes to, work-life balance or making sure that you're living your life in accordance with your values and with your desires. And team coaching is something that we're seeing a lot more of these days. I mean, effectively, the team is the fundamental unit of the organization now. And I don't know about you, but I think many of us have been on teams where, there are a lot of smart people on the team, but the collective intelligence of the team itself dives down. So how do you work with teams? How do you make sure that they're effective? So there's a lot of that going on these days as well. But today, our focus today is on leaders as coaches. And what we're going to be looking at is organizational coaching, internal coaching. So we're not going to be talking about external coaches coming in to coach people inside the organization. We're looking at building the capacity of people within the organization to coach each other and at every level of the organization. So why is coaching becoming increasingly important? And it absolutely is becoming an increasingly important leadership skill. There's no question. More and more, we're getting requests from clients to come in and do internal coaching programs with them because they're recognizing that need. Just as well, coincidentally, I was coaching somebody this week and she had just had her annual performance review, and the top of the list was become a coach, learn to coach your people more. So that's what we're going to be focusing on together. So what is driving this? What's going on in the workplace that's really driving this desire to build internal coaching capacity in organizations? So we know that change is a constant. I mean, we're undergoing quite a dramatic change. We've been living with that for quite a while now. And we know that change is constant, it's rapid, it's unpredictable. What happened in the past isn't necessarily going to repeat in the future. So hindsight is not necessarily a predictor of foresight. Technology is a huge driving change, and we've all been on Zoom for the last year, and we know the importance and the effectiveness of technology, and it's really changing how we interact with each other. At the same time, the World Economic Forum listed people management and emotional intelligence at two of the top skills that people need in the fourth industrial revolution, which started in 2020. So the understanding is that the more technology that we introduce into the workplace, the more we need to balance that with a human touch. I mentioned that teams are now the fundamental unit of the workplace, and they're more matrixed, and we're all working remotely now. And flexible workplace is something that is a real desire by a lot of employees and staff. And so teams are being managed in that way. We're talking about complexity. Challenges are complex with few single causes or solutions. So we've been talking about this for a long time, how organizations need to be agile. And in order for organizations to be agile, you have to have certain processes and systems in place. However, you really need people to be adaptable because organizations function through their people. So how do you build that adaptability and flexibility? Another really important aspect of the changing workplace is the fact that the largest generation in the workforce is now the millennial generation. And what millennials need and wish for in the workplace, what they're asking from their employers has changed from what previous generations were looking for. So let's take a moment and let's ask you, when we're talking about change being a constant and the changes that we've been experiencing in the last 14 months since the beginning of the pandemic. So what changes are you seeing in your workplace since the pandemic? So if you could just enter your answers in the chat, please.
All right, Jane. So I'm seeing increased turnover, especially in technical software roles. That's interesting. Networking, onboarding, lots of flexibility is needed. Loss of personal relationships, burnout, better communication. So that's great to hear. Less certainty about direction. Working remotely is very tactical, change. From physical selling to virtual selling, that can be very different. Work is definitely crazier. I think so many people are feeling that right now. That's stress, loss of productivity, lots of turnover, difficult to recruit. I can imagine that onboarding and recruiting at this stage is difficult. Having your family far away, that lack of access, I guess, is coming out. Zoom fatigue, never disconnecting from work. I think that one is seen often. Separation of home and work is not really there anymore. Virtual communications. So we're talking a lot about work and home and the boundaries. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we're all facing, right?
Yeah, those boundaries that it's hard to divide between work and home, and things really do sort of flow into each other, and it's exhausting for a lot of people.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the other thing to notice though is that how flexible we have been and how much we actually have
Right.
adapted to what's happened. And who knew? I mean, who was really fully prepared for this? And it's a work in progress right now. And, now we're looking forward to potentially hybrid work situations. So that's going to change as well. But I think everything that we're saying really supports the fundamental premise that, the workplace is changing fundamentally even before the pandemic, and that we have to move and flex with that.
Right.
So,
And it's really just been a catalyst for all of these, situations that were there in the background and slowly creeping into our reality. And this just exploded it out, right?
Absolutely. And, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but in the coaching that I do, I have the opportunity to coach people through the McGill Executive Institute, as well as in my own practice around the world. And what I'm seeing more and more from managers is they're understanding that they really need to stay connected to their people. They need to be supporting each other. So they're actually having different types of conversations. And some of these conversations are much more vulnerable and much more personal. People are really getting to know each other. So, when you sit and have a conversation with somebody, when I coach somebody and I can see I'm coaching them, and the person I'm coaching is in their basement and their toys exploding everywhere. And, so you kind of understand what they're going through. So I think that it really is some beneficial things are coming out of this as well, as tiring as it has been for everybody. And I can fully appreciate that myself. So how is the workplace changing? What we're talking about more and more is moving from command and control leadership, where the leader is more, it's more of an authoritative position, and the leader makes more of the decisions with less input by employees. And we're shifting over to leaders as coaches. And what we're looking for here is leaders who support and guide the people they work with. And there's a lot of input in terms of decisions by the people that they're leading. And what's the result in terms of the changing workplace? So, we talk about the need to adapt to our changing environment. So being able to have those types of conversations, you're building capacity within the organization, you're building capacity within the employees to be able to bring leadership of their own to what they're doing. And another huge benefit is that people are engaged, people are motivated, and they bring that energy and that motivation and commitment. So really what we're looking at doing is we're looking at moving from coaching for commitment, coaching for compliance, where people comply with the directive, to coaching for commitment, where people can bring their own ideas, their own energy, their own knowledge to the workplace. And it's just much more dynamic that way as well. So we're looking at moving from boss to coach. So what does that mean, and why are we doing that? The fact is that the manager is the primary factor in an employee's engagement and ultimately in their performance. And we know for a fact that the main reason that people leave organizations is not because of the organization, it's because of their manager and the relationship that they have with their manager. So the manager is in a very strategic position to be able to build that capacity and build that engagement with their staff, with the people they work with their team. And actually, managers account for up to 70% of the variance in a team's performance. So that's huge. So we're looking to build engagement in our organizations, and engagement leads to high performance, and not just to high performance, it's high productivity, high sales, less turnover. I mean, there are benefits in a number of ways. The organization benefits hugely in a number of ways. So we're looking more and more at moving from boss to coach. So Gallup does a lot of interesting work in terms of looking at what's going on in the world in terms of engagement. And what we found is that, or what they found, their research has showed that the vast majority of the working population is actually disengaged. That, I mean, the statistics are quite actually shocking. They speak to the fact that for the world, there are only 15% of people are engaged, of working population is engaged, 67% is disengaged, and 18% is actively disengaged. The picture is brighter in Canada and the US, 31% are engaged, 52% disengaged, and 17% are actively disengaged. So that makes an enormous difference in terms of, as I said before, productivity and high performance and success for organizations. So although technology has changed, human nature hasn't. And there are some fundamental psychological needs that must be met to achieve high performance. Additionally, as I mentioned, our workforce has changed. So currently millennials make up 50% of the global working population. The same holds true for Canada and the US. 50% of the working population are millennials and rising. And so the demands and desires of this generation have changed as well from prior generations. So what millennials are looking for in their work, they want purpose and they want meaning from their work. They want productive working relationships, and they're looking for a manager who can coach them to the next level. One of the key factors that millennials are interested in is career advancement and their career trajectory. So they really are looking for someone to coach them, and they're looking to their manager for that support. A few years ago, Google does some really interesting research. I mean, they're very much a data-driven organization, and they apply that approach to their internal functioning as well. So they had a project called Project Oxygen that they actually started, I think it was back in 2008. That's when they started it off. And what they did was they wanted to discover what were their best managers doing, the ones who were the most successful, the ones who employees wanted to work for, not because they had to, because they chose to. So they surveyed their organization, and what came up, technical competencies and abilities were important, there's no question, but they were principally interested in soft skills, and top number one was be a good coach. Employees were looking for their managers to be good coaches. So then Google took this and they designed their development programs around the results of Project Oxygen, and coaching was at the top. So what are some things that build engagement? What are some factors that build engagement? So opportunities for personal and professional development are key. So we're not just looking at a paycheck, people are looking at their lives. And they want to build their competencies, they want to build their abilities, they want to know what their career trajectory is like. And it's work-life balance is also key, but it's a very holistic approach to building their career. It's really critical for people to understand the link between their work and the organizational mission. People should actually have a direct line of sight between what they're doing and how what they're doing is contributing to the mission of the organization. So again, as a manager, really important for you to be able to make that connection for folks. And if you're somebody who's in an organization and you're not clear how what you're doing has an impact, it was a good question for you to ask. Ongoing performance conversations, and this is really key. So in the past, there used to be an annual performance. Once a year, you'd have your performance review, and then there might be some conversations along the way. But now the focus really is on ongoing performance conversations. And millennials want feedback 50% of the time, 50% more than previous generations have wanted feedback, and they want to connect, especially on a monthly basis. And I was coaching a millennial this week as well. And that's exactly the setup that she has with her manager. So it doesn't mean that it's a lengthy process. So she said every month she meets with her manager for 10 to 15 minutes. You know, they have their sort of their agenda, they check in what's going on. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that because things are shifting so quickly, having that once a year performance review doesn't even make sense anymore, because things are going to change. Your goals might change. You may need to bring that flexibility to what you're doing. So the ongoing performance conversations are key. Frequent recognition. And when I'm talking about that, it's people really want to understand what they're good, you know, what they do well, and they want that to be identified and recognized. And I think that's really key in terms of being able to identify strengths and build on those strengths. And an employer who cares about their employees' well-being, and we've seen this especially in the last 14 months with the pandemic. And I can see that in terms of the people, the organizations that I'm working with, the people that I'm coaching, that there's really been an emphasis on understanding what people are going through and helping them. And then feeling supported, that's really key. There's a public program at the McGill Executive Institute called Essential Management Skills. And I give the first day on leadership and managing and communication. And one of the exercises I do with the group is I present them with 20 adjectives of competencies or attributes in a leader. And they choose the attributes, the top 3 attributes of a leader that they would choose to follow, not because they had to, because they chose to. And I've noticed a change in the last few years that people are really looking for support. They really want to feel supported by their leaders. And that's a critical element that everybody's interested in.
Jane, just a couple of comments. So, you know, a comment from Ashley saying this is, you know, fully what she is seeing within her work environment. Another comment, though, is, you know, perhaps these stats are regarding or were based on millennials, but is it really only millennials that require that and need that?
That's a question. No, I don't think it's only millennials that require that and need that. I think what's happened, though, is that millennials as a generation, that's what they've voiced. So there are a lot of similarities across generations. We're looking for a lot of the same attributes, but I think that millennials are the ones who've brought this to the fore. And yes, you know, we can all relate to them, but it's changed from being like a nice to have to a need to have.
That's really interesting. And yeah, so that's what they brought to the workforce, and it's slowly changing in that direction, or now quickly. Yeah. We actually have a poll for everyone regarding this question of support. And so I'm just going to launch it. And so you just have a couple of questions. And the question really to you is, do you have a boss as a manager, or do you have a coach as a manager, or neither? Perhaps you're in a leadership role and you have neither. So we're seeing some results come in now. Give it a couple of seconds just to finish up. Another question, actually, Jane, was regarding the Gallup study. Do you know if that was done pre or post pandemic? Pre-pandemic. Yeah.
So, I mean, interestingly enough, I actually read an article that engagement in millennials has increased since the pandemic because of the ability to work remotely.
Yeah.
More flexibility. So that's,
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It speaks more to them. All right. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So wonderful that 47% of you have a coach as a manager. I think that is outstanding. And, you know, 37% have a boss. And I think these numbers accurately depict the direction that we're going in, but that there's still a lot of work to be done. And, you know, being a coach is not, as we'll see, is not easy, right? And changing that mindset and the way in which you manage your team it's a muscle we have to flex. So we'll learn more now. I'm going to stop sharing these results and we'll move on.
Great. Thanks, Pam. Yes, and absolutely, it's a muscle that needs to be flexed. It's something that we're working on, that we're building. So before we move into talking about coaching, I do want to mention mentoring, because very often people get the two confused, and they do overlap, but just to be clear, so generally speaking, a mentor is an experienced person, and the focus is really to help the mentee build their career path or build their organizational awareness, their skills. So there's guidance and support is given by the mentor. So it can include advising, counseling, coaching, etc. Generally speaking, the relationship is a longer term commitment. It can be shorter term as well. So it's somebody who is somebody who can help you and support you and guide you with your personal and career growth. And what's interesting that's happening right now is, you know, in the past, mentoring has always been sort of the experience, the older person mentoring the younger person. Now there's some reverse mentoring that's going on because of technology. So now we have younger folks mentoring older folks. So it's just, things are changing and it's just great. It's really interesting. So what is coaching? And I really love this quote because I think it sums it up. So Herminia Ibarra and Anne Scular wrote an article, and you have some references that we'll be sharing with you. And this is one of them. The article, The Leader as Coach, was a great article. An effective manager as coach asks questions instead of providing answers, supports employees instead of judging them, and facilitates their development instead of dictating what has to be done. And I think that just really sums it up perfectly in a nutshell. So what is coaching? Sir John Whitmore, he is sort of known as one of the founding leaders or pioneers of executive coaching. He was actually started off his career as a race car driver, and then he moved into coaching. So it was an interesting transition. And I really love his approach. He has a very human-centric, very appreciative approach of people and their potential and their capacity. And so what he talks about is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance, that we all have this potential inside. And we need to be, there needs to be assistance and engagement to help us unlock that. It's helping people learn rather than teaching them, and it's more of a partnership. It's a co-creation, it's a collaboration, and it's really believing in their potential. So I really love his approach and love his way of being. And you know, there's that Confucius. I think there was. I probably won't say this correctly, but you know, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's building that ability. However, not to say that, you know, sometimes people say, do I always have to be coaching? Like, can't I even share my advice and my information and all my knowledge? And the answer is, you know, absolutely you can. And there are some situations that really require that. So directive is really when we are giving information. So somebody asks you a question, you give them the answer. You give them the answer right away. We see that with mentoring. That's a directive form. Also, if, you know, people are short on time, something has to be done quickly, you don't have time to coach, or if something is very complex and the person hasn't done it before, it's going to be very frustrating trying to coach them through that because they don't have that understanding yet. Laissez-faire is really when you step back and let people do their thing because they're working well, they know what they're doing, and then they don't need your help. Non-directive coaching is really what we're looking at today. And that's where you're, you know, asking questions and you're helping people discover their own answers. So we're going to look at that in more detail. And situational coaching is really the sweet spot. That's really where you want to be, so that when you're in a situation and somebody asks you a question, you can sort of pause and decide what's appropriate here, which direction should I go in. However, first and foremost, coaching is a relationship. So I want all of you to think about a time in your life when you had a great coach, somebody who really helped you. It could have been your supervisor, it could have been a peer, your sports coach, whoever it was. And in the chat, can you please let us know, what did the coach do that was so effective? And what impact did this coach have on you?
As the answers are coming in, I wanted to share a tip that Ashley shared in the chat, which I thought was really great. And she said that when she starts a conversation, she'll usually ask, do you want me to listen and ask questions, or do you want me to offer up solutions? And I think that that's a great, really practical, easy to apply tip for all of us. So I wanted to share that.
Love that, Ashley.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So a couple things coming in are they listened, they asked questions. Listening is definitely one of the key topics coming up here. The coach helped me get back on my career path when I was feeling discouraged and unmotivated. instilled confidence in me, empowered me, saw me for what I could contribute, not what was my label. So that's amazing. Supportive, asked a lot of questions, encouraging, listened, asking questions, showing empathy, understood and oriented and guided me where needed. My mom always asked me questions, which led to my own conclusion. Love that. What would we do without moms? Give me autonomy, gave me lots of space, because that's something that you can need too, right? To develop on your own, is that space. Yeah. Encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone, to push those boundaries. Reflected events in different light that enabled me to see different perspectives. So all of these are great. Helped me set goals and allowed me to develop ways to achieve them. So we're going to see a lot more about those those steps in the upcoming slides, which is great. Made me believe in my potential. Saw my mistakes as part of my learning curve. And that's something. It's all amazing comments. Amazing.
Yeah, great comments. And, saw my mistakes as part of my learning curve. And that really underscores the fact that when you're talking about coaching, you're talking about a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. So that, with the understanding that you can build your skills, you can build your abilities, your competencies, that you're not fixed a certain way, that you can grow and you can do more. And lots of great points raised. I think listening, and we're going to look at that in a couple of minutes, is key. And listening is one of the hardest things that we do. A lot of times people think, communication is just about talking, and communication is a great deal of good communication is about listening well. I love asking questions, making space for me. And I really love that the person said they saw me. And I think it's really important for everybody to be seen, everybody to be understood, and to have that opportunity to have that kind of relationship with your coach. I know for myself, before I started doing this work, my first career, I practiced law, and I practiced law for 12 years as in-house counsel for a major real estate developer. And, I didn't realize it then, but looking back, my boss was an amazing coach. And, I had the opportunity recently. I don't know if I really thanked him properly back then, but I had the opportunity to thank him recently. And it was really a great experience I think for both of us. I thanked him for his patience. I thanked him for his support, and he really cared about me. And that made a big difference, so that caring bit is really such an important part of the relationship that we build with the people that we work with, and especially with your coach and manager.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Pam?
Pardon?
What about you, Pam? Anybody come to mind for you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many people that have touched my life, my life that have encouraged me and coached me in different directions. And it's not always just a manager. Sometimes it's a colleague, someone you work with, and a passing conversation, and and then they follow up with you on what you were discussing with them. And I think one of the wonderful things for me has been that I work in a learning organization, and so that culture is deeply ingrained within everyone. And I would encourage all of us on the call to push that culture within our organizations, because that's really what's going to change the mindsets and allow everyone to get into that growth mindset and not fear mistakes. So yeah, that would be my comment. Yes. And I love the comments keep pouring in the chat, and I love it. And I think that, this is all amazing because we're all learning from each other and what things really impacted each other. So I would encourage you to read through them, and they'll be shared after the call as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And, I think you put your finger on it, Pam. Like, when we're talking about a coaching culture, we're talking about a learning culture. That's really what it's all about, learning from each other and at every level of the organization, and having those conversations with each other. So what are some things that effective coaches do? So you've covered them: ask effective questions and actively listen. Really important to be aware of and pay attention to nonverbal communication. And that might be a little bit more challenging now that we do a lot of our, interactions over Zoom. However, it's still possible to really be focused on the person and their nonverbal communication. I actually find I do a lot of coaching on Zoom, and I actually find it to be a really effective setting to coach. So don't hesitate, don't hold back from coaching over Zoom. Give and receive feedback, and that's where the non-judgmental comes in as well. I mean, giving positive feedback, giving constructive feedback, and feedback should be a two-way street. So if you're a manager, also asking for feedback from your folks in terms of how can you support them better, what can you do better, and having those ongoing conversations is what builds that coaching culture, that learning culture. So remaining neutral and non-judgmental. And sometimes people say, well, how am I supposed to be? Somebody likes to ask effective questions. How am I supposed to be neutral and non-judgmental if I'm doing a performance review and I'm giving them constructive feedback? It's so you're not judging them as people. You're staying open to them in terms of who they are and what they're bringing. You can have comments about their performance, and of course, you have to give constructive feedback. It's part of your role, and it's really part of what people want to hear as well. But just sort of staying in that non-judgmental stance, I think, is really what builds safety and builds relationship between people. Build rapport and empathy. So being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And, a lot of the comments spoke to that when the person said, saw me in terms of who I am. That's rapport and empathy. And are you comfortable with silence? There's a lot of silence that's built in when you're coaching. When you ask a question, pause and let the person think about it and let them answer. And yes, we're introverts and extroverts, and extroverts, I'm an extrovert. So if there's a space, my tendency will be to want to to fill it. So that's a muscle that I need to build. And I have really worked on building it to pause and make sure that the person has an opportunity to think about what they want to say and to say it. So we're going to look at what effective coaches do in a bit more detail now. So Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah. Did you want to run through them all first before we get into the activity?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk to them and then we'll get into the activity.
Great.
So be present and put away distractions. So being present is making sure that you're focused on the other person. We look at our phones on average 120 times a day. So don't just turn your phone over and put it next to you. Even that's a cognitive distraction. Put it away entirely. I was coaching someone, and she's a rising star in this organization, and she has a senior advisor. So he's a mentor and a coach for her. And she said before COVID, when they would do this in person, she would arrive at his office. There wouldn't be a screen on the desk. There was nothing on the desk actually. And he was just sitting there and he was present for her, fully present, focused on her. Incredible. She said it was an incredible experience. Focus on what the team member is saying. And our tendency is to start thinking about what we want to say as the other person is talking. So that's really another muscle that needs to be built. And the fact of the matter is that we can think 3 times as quickly as we can speak. So it's really normal that you're thinking about what you want to say while the other person is talking. So again, just bring awareness to that and be conscious about, managing that. The person you're coaching should be doing 75% of the talking. The coach should not be doing more than 25% of the talking as a general rule. It can fluctuate a bit, but just again, be aware of the fact that you're there to support and guide and to ask questions. And when we ask open questions, what we're trying to do with open questions is to elicit more information. So, a closed question is like, do you like working with John? So there's a yes or no answer versus an open question. How do you like working with John? So you get more information there. Again, can your team help you with this, or where can you enlist some help with this? And you can see the difference between the two. With the second question, where can you enlist some help with this? You're not limiting the person to just the team. Help the team member find their own solutions because they really have that knowledge in them. And, very often somebody will ask for advice and you think that you have the right answer, but it's really important to encourage the team member to dig deep, to get more understanding, get more awareness of what's going on. I was coaching somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they're dealing with kind of a delicate situation. So we'd been talking about it, and he had come up, he had solution A and solution B. And, from what we had talked about so far, he said, what do you think? What do you think I should do? And I was really thinking he should go with solution A, but I didn't want to say anything. So I just said, well, what is your gut telling you? And he paused and he said, I really think I should go with solution B. And then he went on to explain all the reasons why he felt he should go with that solution. And it made perfect sense. And there was a lot of information that I wasn't aware of that he hadn't shared. So that was a situation where, again, if I had interjected my own opinion, it might have put him on a different path, or at least been a little confusing for him. Don't interrupt, even if you think the person, you know what the person is going to say. Just wait until they finish talking, because they may go in a very different direction than they would have if you interrupted. So just let them finish, and structure the coaching session to help them move from their goal, what do they want to achieve, and to action steps, what are they going to do moving forward. So those are like key elements of what effective coaches do. So over to you, Pam.
Awesome. So we're going to take a couple of minutes on this slide, and just so everyone knows, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint deck as well as a recording of the session. But I would encourage you to also take a screenshot of this particular slide, because what we want you to do now is we'll take a multi-layered approach to this. So I would like you in the chat to take a minute and think, what am I really strong at in this list? Maybe one or two. It doesn't have to be all of them. I think that, it's unlikely that there's a person on this call that is perfect at every single one of these. And so let's take a look at what you're good at. Really hone in on that. And I think this is an exercise really for yourself. And while you're thinking of that, I just want to share that I love Jane's example about giving that person space. And I think specifically as a manager, you think you know the day-to-day happenings of a person's role, but you likely don't, given how fast things change in technology and everything. And so even though you think you might know the answer as the manager, I think it's really interesting to allow that space. So I'm going to go through the list here. So a lot of open-ended questions. Make sure that they're talking, providing structure to the session, find their own solutions, be present and help people find their own solutions, not interrupting, help the team find their own solutions, ask open-ended questions. A lot of allowing the team to find their own solutions, which is really, really great. Create action items. So really taking that goal from a goal to actual attainment. What else do we have here? 75, 25%. Not sure what that means. Maybe you could elaborate, Shannon. Be present, don't interrupt questions, don't interrupt, that's it, don't interrupt, take time to respond, focus, putting away all distractions. I think I'm always present because I'm always interested in the person and what they have to say. I need to stop offering solutions as much as I do. That's a great comment, Yvonne, and I think a lot of people feel that. And that actually will lead us to the next one. So what I want to do now is have everyone in the chat, please write one or two things that you know you need to work on. And what we'll do is once we have everyone who's listed what they want to work on, I'm going to pull out one or two, and I'm going to ask everyone on this call to give some suggestions on how we can work on those specific, I don't know, tasks, I guess. No, yeah. The mentee does 75% of the talking and the mentor 25%. That makes sense. All right, so in terms of things to work on, working on solutions and not providing them, listening and not interrupting. Sometimes I interrupt, not to be rude, just because my mind works at 100 kilometers an hour. I feel that as well, Tamara. Focus on what team member is saying. Let the mentee do most of the talking. So I'm seeing a lot of don't interrupt as something that people need to work on, as well as listening. So we're going to take that one out and be happy with the solutions people choose. That's interesting. Work on letting them talk more, less interrupting. Okay, so let's choose less interrupting as the first one. So I'd love for everyone on the call to offer their suggestions on how to interrupt less often. Jane, do you have any suggestions on that? Let's start with you.
Okay, how to interrupt less often?
Yeah.
I think it's presence, and I think it's really focusing on the other person and really being curious about what the other person has to say. I think it's also watching their body language and really being fully present for them. And, also understand that this is difficult. This is not easy to change your way of being. I mean, let's not forget that you've been promoted to managing people because you're good at your job and you're good at what you do, and now you're managing people. So it's natural to want to share that information. It's really natural to want to help people, but just, hold back and just wait and see what comes out in terms of what they have to say. And I think that'll build your capacity to be able to do that, because you're going to start seeing, or you'll continue to see the resolutions, the suggestions, the ideas that they come up with. Great
tips. Some tips from our audience. So count to 3 before speaking, maybe. Building the awareness not to do so is definitely flexing that muscle, right? And practicing it over time. Leave yourself on mute. I like that. I actually found when the person is speaking to bite your tongue, as it brings more awareness, not to interrupt. I think that's a great one. Make your notes on paper rather than speaking them. Making notes is a good one that's coming down. That's coming in. What else? Mute yourself on Zoom. What if the person just keeps talking and talking nonstop?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's a point at which you do need to interrupt. So it's,
I guess that's more of specific to each conversation, I guess, right? Think twice before interrupting. So keep a pad and next to you, write down the words. So when it's your turn, breathe and listen. Wait for their full stop or pause if they provide one. Stay curious, just as you said, Jane. Ask the person what type of interaction they want to have or they need to have. Put your ego on the shelf. There's so many good ones coming through. So we'll definitely have to put this chat in our post email. One of the other things that we worked on our team was using the raise hand feature. I mean, we're all in this kind of Zoom environment now, and so using the raise hand feature really allows you to take turns and stop yourself from interrupting. So that's one of my suggestions. So the other one, no, actually, I think we'll move on because there is a one model that Jane wants to get through, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Great. Okay, thanks, Pam. So the GROW model, and that's the model that Sir John Whitworth and his team came up with. It's been around for a while. I really like it though, because it's simple and it's something that's easy to remember. So you start off, G stands for goal. So you're going to ask the person, what do you want to achieve? R stands for reality. So what's the current situation? What's the context? What's going on? Options, what could you do to achieve your goal? And way, forward, and will, what are you going to do? So it's pretty simple. Goal, and so let's start with the goal. So in your role as coach, what you're really trying to do is you're really trying to make sure that the person you're coaching clarifies their goal and makes it as concrete as possible. The clearer their goal is going to be, the more easily and more readily they're going to achieve it. So you really do begin with the end in mind, like what's the end point? What do you want to achieve? And then there can be different types of goals. So performance goal, developmental goal, whatever it is, a problem to solve, a decision to make. And you also ask them, what do you want from this conversation? So that walking away from this coaching conversation, what do you want to leave with? Then you move into the context, like what's actually going on. And this is really where you're going to have to stay quiet and not offer solutions. And that's really the muscle that needs to be built here, because when somebody asks you something, again, you're going to want to answer, you're going to want to share, you're going to want to help that person and share your knowledge, but no, you have to put a pause on it. So here your role is not to solve the issue or problem, but it's to help the person being coached. So you really help them explore the context, recognize the impact the issue is having on them, the potential impact it's having on other people. You have to kind of help them raise the discomfort around the issue. It's sometimes very difficult for people to change. So, even asking them a question like, what happens if nothing changes, will help motivate them, and also just outline what they're dealing with and build that motivation and engagement to change. So you're really getting clarity and awareness around the issue. Then what you do is you move on to what are all the options. And here you're not looking for the perfect right answer. You're looking to generate, or you're looking to ask the coachee to generate as many potential options as possible. We know when we're brainstorming, when you kind of let yourself go, you're going to come up with things that you wouldn't have thought about otherwise. And this is really an important part of the model, where it is very helpful to allow to like pause after each option and ask the person, well, what else could you do? And what else could you think about? And not move too quickly into decision making and action planning. And yes, this is where, once they finish coming up with all their different options and the different possibilities, this is where you can come in and you can share what you think with them. But you wait until they've generated all of their different ideas before that you do that. And then finally, what will you do? So here, what you're doing is you're defining their action plan and their commitment to the action plan. So I often ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to this? And if it's under an 8, if it's less than, I ask them, like, what else could you do to be more committed, or what would commitment look like for you? Or we might have to go back and look at some of the other options. If that commitment isn't there, then the engagement won't be there either. So at this point, you're really helping convert a discussion into a decision and an action plan moving forward after you've reviewed all those potential options. I would also suggest that, what you do at the end of a coaching session, you can have a conversation around, how did this go? Like, what worked well and what could we do differently next time? Different people like to be coached in different ways. So I think that's an important conversation to have as well. And then sometimes afterwards, depending on the situation, they will come back to you, and that's part of the agreement. They're going to come back to you and tell you what they did, what worked well, what didn't work well. And if something didn't work well, that's an opportunity for another coaching conversation right there. So that is that in a nutshell in terms of the Grow Coaching model. You have a video actually in the references that we're going to be sending out to you. And it is a video of a coach and a coachee. She's coaching someone, and they go through all the steps of the Grow model. So you'll be able to see it in action.
Great. So thank you, Jane. So a couple minutes for questions. One of the questions that came up that is directly related to the last point of the Grow model is, what if the coachee is experienced and passive? They're not engaging in the experience.
Well, you kind of can't force coach somebody. They have to be, it's a co-creation, it's a collaborative situation. If you're the one who's driving it and really pushing it, then I think that's a coaching conversation in itself, in terms of what may be holding them back. And, sometimes what happens is that people resist, and we don't really know why They may be resisting. We might be making assumptions about things. But if you have a conversation around that, they may share things with you that you didn't otherwise know. And that's what might be holding them back. So in that situation, I wouldn't force anybody, but I would have a conversation around what's going on for them right now.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible that the end result is that you're not the right person for coaching them?
Yes, it can happen.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm starting a new coaching relationship, we always have a preliminary conversation to make sure that we're a good fit. And it's not personal, different coaches and work better with different people. So really making sure that you're the right fit for the person working with, the person you're coaching.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, it's a relationship. So it needs to be.
Yeah.
So here's another question. One often hears of employees who feel their managers are threatened by them, and as a result, may not always have their employees' best interest in heart. So what kind of advice do you have, Jane, for these types of situations where perhaps an employee wouldn't want to open up in that kind of a relationship for fear of who knows?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I've got to say, I mean, if you're in a situation where there's discomfort, like again, it's the relationship, right? There's discomfort around that. I would probably, if I were in that person's shoes, I would probably ask for feedback from my manager to understand like what's going on in terms of what I could be doing differently, what I could do better. Like I said, we just don't always know what's going on for the other person. Maybe, ask around communication style or ask around how you can better support them. Because also, let's not forget that our managers are under a lot of pressure. They have a lot on their shoulders as well. So there can be things going on for them that are difficult. So I would try and have as open a conversation as possible in the circumstances. I know it's not always easy and I know it's not always possible.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Drawing from that, actually, there's a good question to follow on to that is that, do you have a set of good open-ended questions? Maybe conversation openers that could allow, these free-flowing conversations.
Yes, I do. And, maybe what I can do is put some questions together and we can send those out as well, Pam.
Yeah.
So good question. I mean, I just usually ask people what's on your mind or what can I help you with or what would you like to discuss? And, but then like we're talking about what's your goal, but just even if you say what's on your mind, but then make very sure that you ask them, what do you want to get out of this conversation? Because it's a very broad question. They might go off on a tangent and then what they want to be coached on is something quite different. So, all right, to say, what would you like to talk about today?
Danielle just in the chat wrote the exact same thing at the same time that you said it. Super funny.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I don't think at the moment there are any other questions. Let me just check very quickly. Oh, yes, one more. Does coaching replace accountability? So my assumption of the question is, are you, if you're coaching somebody, does it replace them to be accountable for their role or their direction? Is it then on you, the coach? That's kind of what I assumed.
Well, from my perspective, I think coaching builds accountability.
Yes.
Because what you're doing is if you tell somebody what to do, as I said earlier, they may comply, but the accountability isn't quite as felt. And if you're coaching somebody and they come up with their own solution, there's going to be a greater commitment. And I think that accountability accompanies that very strongly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, co-creation, right, of the solution is a lot stronger in terms of motivation to follow through with it.
And you have to take ownership for your own solution, right?
Yes.
Ownership for your own decision. So that's part of your growth as well. So I think coaching supports it.
Great. Yeah, so true. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. So I just want to thank everyone who joined today to make this session a success. There was so many good ideas in the chat. so much great feedback from everyone. We're all learning from each other, and I love that. Just to let you know, the next session of Level Up will be May 5th, and that one is in a completely different topic. So it's actually regarding artificial intelligence and HR. And I say completely different topic, but at the end of the day, the human skills are tightly entwined in all of this. So thank you so much, Jane, for a great session. And we'll see you all next time. Enjoy the snowy day in Montreal or other weather elsewhere.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you so much, Pam. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.